Thank you, Counsel. Can I have the people of the state of California also announce their presence?
Good morning, Your Honor. Anne Marie Schubert, District Attorney, Sacramento County, for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Greg Totten, District Attorney of Ventura County, for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Todd Spitzer, Orange County District Attorney for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Dinah Becton, Contra Costa County District Attorney for the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Joyce Dudley for the people of Santa Barbara County.
Good morning, Your Honor. Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney for the people.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Nancy O'Malley, Alameda County District Attorney for the people.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Tori Verber Salazar on behalf of the people of San Joaquin County for the great state of California.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. So at this time, I'm going to, let me ask Mr. Kress, do you waive formal arraignment for judgment and sentence? All right, I'm going to arraign Mr. DeAngelo on the charges post-plea. On June 29th, 2020, the defendant entered a plea of guilty to the following crimes. Count 1, charge of murder of Claude Snelling, which occurred on September 11th, 1975 in the county of Tulare, a violation of Penal Code Section 187(a), murder in the first degree. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 2, the charge of murder in the first degree of Katie Majori, which occurred on February 2nd, 1978 in the county of Sacramento. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 3, the charge of murder in the first degree of Brian Majori, which occurred on February 2nd, 1978 in the county of Sacramento. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 4, the charge of murder in the first degree of Deborah Manning, which occurred December 30th, 1979 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to that murder of Deborah Manning and that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2(c)(3). In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Deborah Manning was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2(c)(3). Count 5, the charge of murder in the first degree of Robert Offerman, which occurred on December 30th, 1979 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a firearm in the course of that murder, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Robert Offerman was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2(c)(3). Count 6, the charge of murder in the first degree of Sherry Domingo, which occurred on July 27th, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Sherry Domingo and that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2(c)(17). In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Sherry Domingo was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2(a)(17). Count 7, the charge of murder in the first degree of Greg Sanchez, which occurred July 27th, 1981 in the county of Santa Barbara. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Greg Sanchez was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2(a)(17). Count 8, the charge of murder in the first degree, Darlene Smith, which occurred between the dates of March 13th, 1980 and March 16th, 1980 in the county of Ventura. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Charlene Smith in that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Charlene Smith was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 9, the charge of murder in the first degree of Lyman Smith, which occurred between the dates of March 13th, 1980 and March 16th, 1980 in the county of Ventura. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Lyman Smith was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 10, the charge of murder in the first degree of Patrice Harrington, which occurred on August 21st, 1980 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Patrice Harrington that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Patrice Harrington was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 11, the charge of murder in the first degree of Keith Harrington, which occurred on August 21st, 1980 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance of the murder of Keith Harrington that the murder was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 12, the charge of murder in the first degree of Manuela Whitenu, which occurred on February 6, 1981 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance to the murder of Manuela Whitenu in that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Manuela Whitenu was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. Count 13, the charge of murder in the first degree of Janelle Cruz, which occurred May 5th, 1986 in the county of Orange. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Janelle Cruz and that the murder was committed in the commission of a rape within the meaning of Penal Code Section 261 and pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 17, paren 3. In addition, the defendant admitted the special circumstance that the murder of Janelle Cruz was committed in the commission of a burglary within the meaning of Penal Code Section 459 and a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. In addition, the defendant admitted that he did commit multiple murders within the meaning of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 3, and Penal Code Section 190.2, paren C, paren 7, in counts 2 through 13. Count 14, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe No. 1, having occurred on September 4th, 1976 in the county of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted that he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, in violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 15, charge of kidnap with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe No. 2, having occurred on April 2nd, 1977 in the county of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery in violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 16, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 3, having occurred April 15th, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the commission of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 17, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 4, having occurred May 3rd, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. Count 18, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 5, having occurred May 14th, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 19, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 6, having occurred May 17, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 20, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 7, which occurred on May 28, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222. Count 21, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 8, having occurred on October 1st, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222. Count 22, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 9, having occurred on October 21st, 1977 in the County of Sacramento, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222. Count 23, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 10, having occurred October 7th, 1978 in the County of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. Count 24, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 11, which occurred on October 13th, 1978 in the County of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. Count 25, charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 12, having occurred October 28, 1978 in the County of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, and that he personally used a knife in the course of that robbery as well, violation of Penal Code Section 12022. Count 26, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery of Jane Doe number 13, having occurred on June 11th, 1979 in the County of Contra Costa, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. In addition, the defendant admitted he personally used a firearm in the course of that robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. I'm going to hear from, we're going to hear from the people on this imposition of sentencing. I believe the district attorney from Contra Costa County wishes to be heard first.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dinah Beckton, District Attorney for Contra Costa County. Over 4 decades, that's a long time to wait for justice to be served. Finally, we have arrived at that day, the day when those who have waited so very long will hear that Joseph DeAngelo will now serve the rest of his life behind bars. The boogeyman, the man whose horrific, unspeakable crimes devastated the lives of so many people, lives that will never be the same, lives forever changed. Moments, hours of terror that can never be erased or forgotten. I want to underscore the strength of our victims and their families, the courage that they've displayed over the years, and their courage this week to come forward, share in open court with all of us the pain and the agony that they have endured over the years. After today's sentencing, Mr. DeAngelo will never threaten our victims again. He will never harm another soul. His evil actions are hard to describe and recount. The victims in this case bravely told the court this week the lasting trauma and pain caused by DeAngelo's horrific actions. As a former Superior Court judge myself, hearing from victims during the sentencing phase of a case is powerful and very sobering. Those whose lives were forever changed deserved a day in court, and I want to thank the court for allowing each victim who had the courage and the determination to come forward, allowing them the time to speak. We appreciate the opportunity for their voices to be heard. Thank you, Your Honor. Let us not forget the important words this week from these men and women and their families. Their words were hard to listen to due to the depravity displayed by Mr. DeAngelo, who preyed upon these victims. I appreciate the courage that it took to come forward. Just emphasizing a few statements from our victims in Contra Costa County. One said, "I survived and thrived because of the love and the support of friends and family, for which I can never thank them enough. Now, here we are, all strong women, not victims, having our say to a madman." Another said, "Finally, I can go forward. I have the justice I have been waiting so long for. I never thought I would get it." And last but not least, one said, "We are committed and determined not to let these hours in October 1978 define who we are and what we were to become." I am so encouraged to hear that by finally seeing justice served, our victims now have hope. They have hope for a future. The criminal justice system is often complex, long-winded, and slow. In this case, for decades, DeAngelo eluded capture. However, thanks to the task force under Sacramento District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, he was brought into custody. Law enforcement officials never gave up hope that we could bring the Golden State Killer to justice. The history in this case and the Contra Costa County District Attorney's Office history is tied to our former cold case investigator, Paul Hull. Mr. Hull spent decades, much of his career, and he played a tremendous role in solving this case and bringing us to this day of reckoning. I want to express my gratitude for Paul Hull's tireless work on this case on behalf of the victims across the state of California. The entire prosecution team spent countless hours to bring this case to a resolution and to assist the victims throughout this entire process, including our victim witness advocates and our attorneys. And I thank the team for the important work that you have done to bring this case to an end. The crimes spanned over 13 years that we know of. The seriousness and the gravity of the offenses, the psychological harm, the pain and the brutality of these offenses requires nothing less than the imposition of the maximum sentence. The victims must be assured that Mr. DeAngelo will never ever walk this earth again as a free man. Your Honor, I stand for the people to respectfully thank the court for imposing the maximum amount of time allowed. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. The district attorney from Orange County wish to be heard.
Good morning, Your Honor. If it pleases the court, I cannot thank you enough on behalf of the people of Orange County and the people of the state of California for your grace and your patience, Your Honor. You have been amazing, and I know everybody in this room agrees just how much you have allowed us so much leeway and courtesy during these proceedings. I just wanted to publicly acknowledge you and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I also would like to thank my team, Debbie Lloyd, Dennis Conway, Pat Dixon, Investigator Hutchcraft, Investigator Doyle, Law Clerk Rebecca Malkin, and of course I want to thank Anne Marie and her team. And I want to acknowledge, Your Honor, in public, just the amazing work of the district attorneys who work collaboratively to bring this case to justice. Many people don't know there's two interesting things about a case where a death penalty is on the line. One is that is a decision of the elected district attorneys and no one else. And in California, the only sentence that's handed down by a jury is death. Yesterday marked 40 years to the date that a stranger walked into Patty and Keith Harrington's Dana Point home and robbed those 3-month newlyweds of their life. Yesterday. The day the two brothers testified about their youngest brother, Keith. They never made it to their first wedding anniversary. Manuela Whittam spent 28 short years on this earth, never knowing the joy of motherhood. And you heard yesterday that her surviving husband never lead an appropriate life after that, until he died. Janelle Cruz, 18 years old, life was ended before she realized her dreams of graduating from college or picking out a wedding dress. Natural things we all live for in our lives. For the last 3 days, we heard about the 13 lives that were cut short through murder. We heard of the memories that were never made. We heard of the dozens and dozens of sexual assault victims who had to go through that depraved act while some of their husbands watched, which is beyond comprehension for me. As he was destroying your lives, he got to be on his boat, blow out birthday candles, hold his granddaughter. But all the time in the back of his mind, he knew we would get. Sir, in 2006, when I was the chairman of the committee that oversaw state prisons in the state assembly for the state of California, I watched the last man executed in the San Quentin death chamber. I was a witness to that death. When I was elected district attorney and this case became mine on behalf of the Orange County citizens, I wanted one thing. I wanted to wait those 25 years, and when I was at 85 or beyond, depending on how long it took for you to appeal your death sentence, I wanted them to wheel me in on my wheelchair. And instead of just staring straight forward in some glazed over eyes, I wanted to stare at you and watch you silently slip into the night. Never again to take away anybody's dreams that you ruined and the nightmares you created. I wanted to watch that. You made it personal, and it was personal for me on behalf of all these people. I honestly believe that this person, not even a person, this beast deserved the ultimate punishment of death. But we met with our victims. We knew the age of the case. We knew how long it took to solve. And we knew that this was the right thing to do, so you could all be here today in your lifetime, as long as you had this opportunity. Today, this event today is a sentencing. Earlier in the week was a celebration of life on behalf of the victim. But today is a sentence. And it's meant for the victims who are silently now in heaven, or those of you who, thank God, are still here on earth, who now can become free from the shackles that you have been forced to endure since your paths intersected with the devil. Today, it's the devil who will be condemned to be behind bars for the rest of his life. He will never be free, thank God. He may have destroyed lives, but he has not destroyed memories. And I'm so grateful for the stories that all of you shared this week on behalf of your loved ones and behalf of yourselves. But for the victims whose voices have been stolen, and the family members who sadly ran out of time and could not make it here today, I want you to know that there are 13 angels watching this today. And they're with us right now. They have this opportunity to see this too. I would ask that as we are in the presence of these 13 who have left this earth but have gone to a better place, that you join me in a moment of silence for them and for all those who are still here with us or who may have passed but have experienced this horror and this nightmare. You would bow your heads, I appreciate it. On behalf of the people of Orange County and the state of California, Your Honor, again, please accept our just heartfelt thank you for the way you've conducted this court, your personnel. We're so appreciative.
Thank you, Mr. Spitzer. Would the district attorney representing Santa Barbara wish to be heard?
Thank you, Your Honor. 25 years ago, I prosecuted my first sexual assault case in which the recipient witness was a loved one of the victims. At that point, I assumed the only traumatized person would be the victim. 3 groups of people in this courtroom know that that assumption is wrong. The recipient witnesses of crimes committed by the defendant, the prosecutors, and the defendant himself. I know the recipient witnesses know that because they lived through it. I know the prosecutors know that because they listened carefully to those witnesses. And I know the defendant knows that because he is driven to inflict the greatest amount of pain that he possibly can. And therefore, it wasn't enough for him to rape or beat or shoot his victims. He wanted to take inflicting human pain to the highest level possible. Therefore, he often ensured that their loved ones saw or heard his victims being tortured or killed. That's just who Joe DeAngelo is. My best friend, LADA Jackie Lacey, recently told me, if you really want to hurt me, hurt someone I love. Well, this defendant really wanted to hurt. He really wanted to hurt as many people as he could, and he did just that. Around the same time that I prosecuted that case, I prosecuted my first rape of an intoxicated person case. Again, at that point, I assumed that if she couldn't remember being raped, that had to be better than remembering the gory details. Once again, I was wrong. And how do I know that? Because the victim told me so. She said, every morning when I wake up, my first thought is that something terrible happened to me. I just don't know what. I just don't know what. I don't think I can ever get over this thing until I know those details. And then she started to cry. And a very long minute went by, and she said, I'm actually jealous of rape victims who remember being raped. Yesterday, as I listened to Debbie Dominguez's powerful, powerful words about not being able to enter her home or know the details of what happened. And then I thought about Doug Domingo, Brian Sanchez, Dr. Offerman, all of whom are here today. And then all of the other victims' loved ones who will never know the details of what happened to their child, their mother, their father, their uncle, their friend. And I thought maybe some of them also felt they couldn't begin their healing process until they knew all the details. To them, I humbly suggest you don't. I too have experienced great loss. I too experienced that. And I believe you, like me, have a hole in your heart that you hope will never heal. Because you love them. You love them so very much. And I believe that is what you need to know to proceed with your healing process. What you need to know is what you already know. In life, you loved them and they loved you. And now that this case is finally over, perhaps what you need to concentrate on, the details of that love. Focus on the things that made them lovable and allow yourself to let those memories make you smile again. I believe it is possible. True healing can come from that knowledge. Because knowing that you are loved and that you were loved is truly the most powerful knowledge of all. Again, thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Would the district attorney representing Tulare County wish to be heard at this time?
Good morning, Tim Ward, Tulare County District Attorney. Your Honor, when your gavel falls today, this sentence will be final, and this case will soon then be viewed through the prism of history. And as we have seen and heard this week, the defendant slowly ceases to be the focal point of that story. Instead, my prayer going forward is the legacy which remains will focus on the triumph and the resiliency displayed by the survivors that we've heard from this week. Though questions will inevitably remain, we should continue to be steadfastly focused on the compassion justly due these families assembled here today. Though these despicable horrors began in Tulare County, we will not be defined by evil. Instead, our entire community stands silently alongside the Snelling, the Hupp, the McGowan families, and all families here today and families across this state. In searching for some positive message to remain, I say this: the triumphant spirit of these families loudly cries across this state and across the entire world in one unified, single voice, crying out to other families who have been victimized, yet they patiently, agonizingly await their day in court. In that unified voice, the world is now told, never give up. You are not forgotten. Like many families that we've heard from this week, others across this nation are living a never-ending, nightmarish journey, a journey of continually closed doors. Today, they are shown and they are told, never give up hope. As science and technology evolve, the space for evil like this to operate within gets smaller and smaller. Simply put, the DNA will never forget. And by God's grace, may the doors of justice open for other families. That voice of hope is the true legacy that shall remain, and it shall not be silenced, ever. On behalf of the Snelling, the Hupp, and the McGowan families, the Visalia Police Department, and the entire Tulare County community, Your Honor, I want to thank you for providing a model of judicial decorum that has shown remarkable deference to the families and the survivors this week. You have given the state a glimpse into why we have a system of justice in the first place, and that is to serve victims. You have allowed their voices to resonate so loudly, and you have provided a model that other courts would do well to emulate.
Thank you, sir.
As District Attorney of Tulare County, it is my honor to speak on behalf of the victims and survivors listed in count 1 of the complaint and give voice to Professor Snelling and Officer McGowan, who cannot do so today. But with their voice, I hereby ask you, Your Honor, to sentence this defendant to the maximum allowed under the law.
Thank you, sir. Would the District Attorney representing Ventura County wish to be heard?
Good morning, Your Honor. I, too, want to thank you for the courtesy and kindness you so graciously extended to each of the victims over the last 4 days. Your Honor, as we have witnessed during these victim impact statements, this is a case about light and darkness. The victims and survivors who testified before this court are people of light. By their courage, they have shined a very bright light on the magnitude of the crimes before this court. It painted a picture of the immense impact these horrific crimes had on their lives. In a sense, they have also brought to life their loved ones. In doing so, they have honored their memories as people of purpose people of character, people that would have made a difference in this world were it not for their brutal murder at the hands of the defendant, who today, thank goodness, at last faces judgment. And in their statements, the victims and survivors also revealed to us the fundamental goodness of the human spirit and its will to endure, to thrive, even in the face of unspeakable suffering, loss. We must also confront the terrible darkness of the defendant, who sits before this court today stoic, devoid of humanity, lacking any remorse, and utterly unredeemable. And it is telling that his behavior both during the crimes and since his arrest reveals a person who consciously, who willfully, who intentionally avoids the light. His crimes were always committed in the dark of night. And it was common for him to cover lights, to cover furnishings, to cover televisions, to avoid any ambient light. And even now, here in this courtroom, he turns away from the light and dare not face or look at his accusers for fear that the truth of their testimonies might penetrate deep darkness of being. Yesterday, during his victim impact statement, Drew Wittoon likened this proceeding to the horror one might see in a war crimes. Certainly no event in modern history can fully compare the extermination of 6 million Jews by now. But still, Wittoon's analogy is fitting in this case when one looks at the horror, the crimes committed by this defendant. That analogy also reminded me of a story that was told by the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, former United States Supreme Court Justice William H. Jackson. And the story, I believe, serves as a metaphor for the importance of the rule of law and justice itself, today and always. According to this story, a visitor at a cathedral under construction approached 3 workmen and asked them what it was that they were doing. They were all stonemasons. First muttered, "I'm earning a living." The second gave an uninspired reply, "I'm laying this stone." The third one looked up at the cathedral with a gleam in his eye and his face lit up by his faith and said, "I'm building a cathedral." Now, one might question the comparison of what we do here today to the building of a cathedral, particularly given the grotesque, gruesome, and ugly nature of the crimes before this court. But I do want to point out that over the last 4 days, we consciously and intentionally avoided showing any images of the gruesome crime scenes that are so much a part of this case. We did so not to marginalize the brutality and sheer cruelty of the defendant's crimes, but instead to honor, to shine a light on, and to pay tribute to the lives of the victims and their survivors. Your Honor, no one in this courtroom doubts or is uncertain about the ultimate sentence that you will impose today. And we acknowledge that no judgment by this court can bring back or fully restore the lives impacted by this cruel serial killer and rapist. Still, you have presided over a very emotional yet dignified and respectful proceeding for the purpose of meting out man's justice on this defendant. and as District Attorney for the Ventura County, I am grateful for the way you have acquitted yourself, conducted this proceeding. It is also my fervent hope, my prayer, that much like that stonemason looking up at the beauty of a cathedral he was building, the victims who appeared before you can look up and feel a sense of hope, a sense of renewed hope, a sense of purpose, a sense of life, with the knowledge that today, in this courtroom, in this time, in this place, we all did the very best we could do to deliver man's justice, which, as we know, is never fully adequate. I now respectfully ask the court to impose the maximum sentence authorized by law in the plea in this case, and again, I thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Does the district attorney representing Sacramento County wish to be heard at this time?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I stand here as the District Attorney for Sacramento County, but I stand here incredibly proud of this team. I thank the defense team for your professionalism through the entirety of this litigation. Judge Bowman, you have demonstrated dignity and grace that is remarkable. It has been 16,417 days since Joseph DeAngelo began his reign of terror. 44 years, 11 months, and 11 days. For those in Sacramento, it's been 16,136 days since the first rape of Phyllis. 44 years, 2 months, and 4 days. It's been 42 years since Brian and Katie were taken from this world. And it's been 12,529 days since Janelle, that beautiful light, was taken. 34 years, 3 months, and 18 days. A few days after this plea agreement, the plea on June 29th, I had an email forwarded to me from a local journalist, from a woman from Sacramento named Pam. It could have been written today. In my belief, it encapsulates how I think everyone that has sat in this courtroom for this last week or sat in their homes and watched this transpire feels. And I'm going to quote that. I am wrung out. I almost put DeAngelo in the subject line, but I cannot give him any more headlines. I am 71 years old, third-generation native Sacramentan. I lived through the terror of the East Area rapist. Over the past 40 years, I have read everything regarding this case. No window is ever open or unlocked at night, ever. Gates on either side of our home are locked always. Lights surround our home. My close friends all feel the same. Recently, a contractor in my home questioned why my sturdy, large, nailed picture window facing out hadn't been considered for replacement with, quote, nice sliders with screens to open out. I looked at the 40-something sternly and I said my always ready answer. 3 words: East Area rapist. He made some comment about how he'd heard something about him, but he'd been, quote, arrested. I explained, you don't understand. I lived it. It will never go away. She goes on to say, while I was not a victim, I was a victim. On Monday, June 29th, I sat in front of my TV and I cried. I cried for the victims. I cried for the families. The horror, the terror of what those who died went through in their final moments. As a person of faith, I put my faith in God's love, that He immediately covered those victims in peace and in love. I have to believe that in order to put my foot forward every day. Pam followed up with a note to me just a couple days ago. My heart, my being continues to weep for those victims. For the last week, our hearts and our beings have wept for each of his victims and their families. Their words and their stories will never be forgotten. As described by so many of the murder victim families and the crime victims, our society has been deprived of exceptional and extraordinary people. These rapes and these murders, in the words of our victims, have cut across families, friends, generations, and entire communities. In the words of Brian Sanchez, overwhelming grief is an understatement, and true justice is an overstatement. Personally, I have faith that their souls have been covered in peace and love. My greatest hope for all of these victims and their families, perhaps, is best put in their own words, as we heard this week. The greatest revenge is to live your lives. Paint your children and your grandchildren's rooms again with hearts and rainbows. Water ski again. Know that the monster of your childhood or your younger years is gone forever and will die alone in the dark. To the defendant, or as Mr. Wittoon called him, the convict, there is honestly little left to say. Your name will fade from the headlines. But despite that fade, know one thing. Until the day you leave this earth, this incredible team, a team that has worked for decades to find you, to arrest you, prosecute you, convict you, will not just promise you, but will ensure that you will never succeed at deceiving or manipulating the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation into believing that you are some feeble, inept old man who somehow deserves better housing, treatment, or privileges. Lastly, Your Honor, and perhaps in what I think are some of the most powerful words we heard this week from Chris Pedretti, Mr. DeAngelo, there is no prayer strong enough to save you. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Folks, we're going to take a very, and I mean very short break, like 5 minutes. I'm going to have my court reporter exchange out for another court reporter. I wouldn't wander off too far. Okay.
All right, everybody, we're going to be in recess for about 5 minutes. If you could just recess in place, that would be great.
Anyone needs to run to the restroom? You guys are good? Al, you're good?
Okay. Yeah. 246, did you guys head all the way back to Chambers? Copy.
Okay, we're gonna go. You guys got it? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We have to get them sitting and standing. reading these letters to make excuses for his actions, to justify or explain his actions, or to cause any further pain to the victims. This is from his sister. I feel moved towards writing this so that my brother Joe will know that my love for him will never go away. That's to say also that my sadness does not fade regarding the charges against him. As I think back and try to more clearly understand it all, so many things come to mind. Don't misunderstand that I am searching for an excuse for it all, because I'm not. I do more or less blame our father in part. He was a stern military career man and also a womanizer. He was also responsible for causing abuse in our family, mainly being hard on Joe and our mother. Both mental and physical abuse was usually directed to them. It got to be more than I and my siblings could stand, so we all chose to leave home at early ages. I left at 15, and my siblings followed before any of them turned 18. There were so many other things that Joe faced, and I'm sure he couldn't cope with it all. Of course, it will never justify what has happened, and I can only express my deepest sympathy to all of the survivors and to the families of the victims. May God bless each of you. This is from a niece. Joseph James DeAngelo is my uncle, not by blood, but by marriage. I've known him my whole life. I was in their wedding when I was 5. I've lived with them on and off throughout the years. Spent all summers with them and most weekends. If I couldn't get there by bus, Joe always came and got me. Life with them was good. It was a dream. My life for once felt normal. My home life was troubled. I was verbally and physically abused by my dad. I didn't want to live anymore. It was just torture. Joe stepped in and said she can live with us. That was the beginning of my new life with Joe. He saved my life. I didn't know how good life could be. He taught me everything, always taking me out for driving lessons. He was so patient. Just try again, he'd say. I wasn't used to that. I'm used to getting yelled at and hit for making mistakes. Joe was kind and loving. He played games with me. Joe, out of anyone in my life, has always been my favorite person. I always wished he were my dad. He made my life peaceful. He is a part of why I am good, kind, and loving person I am today. This is my story. This is the truth. I'm thankful I had him in my life. I wouldn't be here today.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Kress.
Good morning. My family met the DeAngelos when Joe was 13 years old. We were living on Mather Air Force Base. Homes were duplexes, so in a manner of speaking, we were neighbors. I became good friends with Connie, and my little brothers played with Johnny. Joseph became good friends with my brothers, and later very close with my family. Joe became another brother, and my parents treated him as they did their own 5 sons. Joe called my parents Mom and Pop. Mom and Dad were sparse with the hands-on punishment, but didn't hesitate to verbally correct us, and Joe was included. We were always having family get-togethers, and Joe was always a part of the fun. Every holiday was a big celebration, and Joseph was included. On Christmas, Joe always had a gift for Mom and Pop. Joseph and my brothers did the typical teenage things, fishing, shooting their BB guns, talking about girls and cars, going to the movies and swimming at the river. Then they were old enough to buy cars, and it was load the car with their buddies and drive-ins, here we come. While we were at Mather Air Force Base, it became clear that household chores, cooking, and other household chores were Joe's responsibilities. He was responsible for his brother and sister, making sure they were fed, homework done, baths, and bed on time. Joe had to make sure the house was cleaned, his mother worked, and of course his father had a job as well. All this responsibility on a 13-year-old child was too much. He didn't really have a lot of time to goof off like other 13-year-old boys do. He wasn't in baseball, and later high school and junior high, he didn't participate in sports. He showed no interest because his father didn't take an interest in sports or his son. Joe never complained or aired his feelings about things that bothered him. He was not a braggart. I always remember him as smiling, laughing, and enjoying being around the family. I remember nights when my mom was so tired, but she couldn't go to bed because several of my brother's buddies were gathered to discuss girls and dating, and Mom always made time for them. She answered their questions and listened to them. Joe was there on several occasions. He came to the house quite often. After joining the military, he always spent time with the family when home on leave. He brought Mom gifts from different ports of call. When Joseph graduated from high school, joined the military, became a police officer, got married, and had children, the entire family was proud of him, just like we were with every accomplishment of each other. Joseph was a close friend, another brother, respectful to Mom and Pop, and always polite. He was helpful and considerate. I never heard a foul word come out of his mouth. When Joe married and their first child came along, my sister and I took turns babysitting for them. Joe would be sleeping or grocery shopping or baking or paying bills. Sometimes he would be working on his radio-controlled boats. Not just a kit, but 6 to 7 foot boats he would take to Nimbus Lake, and we'd go along to watch. When we were babysitting at noon, we drove to the McGeorge School of Law so Sherry could nurse the baby. Joseph paid us well and was appreciative of our time. He was a good father. He sent his girls to a Montessori school in their early years, and he paid for their college. While they were young, he paid for horseback riding, skating, and supported them in whatever they did. He cooked for them, kept a clean house and a neat yard. Through all this, Joe never forgot to visit Mom and Pop and come to the house on holidays. When Mom and Dad passed away, he came to visit my sister, and I cried. He always told us before he left, "Let me know if you need anything. If there's anything I can do." He always left us hugs when he arrived and left. This is from a niece. As I sit down to write this letter, I realize there's only one place to start. I wish my deepest sympathy, sorrow, and pain relief to all of the victims. I cannot imagine what any of you endured. I'm simply writing this letter to tell you I do not know the person known as the Golden State Killer. In no time did I see anything that would have led me to believe that. I know him as my Uncle Joe, whom I love clearly. My Uncle Joe was always my hero, the one I couldn't wait to see. I hunted as a child with him. We went crawdad fishing in the canal, ate pizzas, got ice cream, just plain had good times. We camped together as a family. He always made it a point to attend any special occasions I had. My wedding and my daughter's first birthday, to name a couple. I always felt that my uncle loved me and still do. I personally feel that someone else is inside of him who I do not know. Our last visit was 3 weeks before his arrest. We spent much time together talking, and I will cherish it forever. Uncle Joe, I will always remember your last words to me. I love you, sweetie, and I'll see you soon. The day we found out about the arrest, my mom called me, and I rushed right over to her house as I heard she collapsed. The detectives were there. We've been harassed by media, investigators, and people who blame us for something we had no knowledge of. I believed I knew my uncle, and I am still in shock. I feel for my cousins and family, as nobody understands, and we try to make sense of it, but you just can't. I do not know the person who committed those crimes. I know my uncle, who I love and always love. There's so much more I could say about what a wonderful uncle, dad, son, brother, and great uncle to my kids he was. My heart is crushed, and I will never be the same trusting person. I no longer have trust for anyone. It's really hard to end this letter, but I guess all I can say is I'm very sorry to the victims. I can't imagine what they went through. I love my Uncle Joe as I knew him, and that will never change because I can't wrap my head around the fact that someone so caring and loving could have done those things. Mr. DeAngelo would like to make a brief statement.
DeAngelo?
I've listened to all your statements, each one of them. And I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Defense submitted.
Yes.
As he has desired since the beginning of this case, Mr. DeAngelo has accepted responsibility for his crimes by pleading guilty and has even admitted uncharged crimes. He is now prepared to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kress. Reference to Sacramento Probation Department for pre-sentence investigation report was waived at the time of plea, and a 1203.C report was requested or will be requested. Courts also considered the sentencing memorandums submitted by the defense as well as the people. With respect to the approval of this disposition, the court approves of this plea. I have considered the comments of counsel, the facts in this case, as well as the overall circumstances of this disposition. I've considered the defendant's age, the fact there are inmates currently on death row and have been so for 30 years. I have considered the fact that there is currently a moratorium on the death penalty in California. Furthermore, this disposition does give survivors and their loved ones an opportunity to have their words heard and not to endure the imaginable emotions that they would experience by sitting through such a trial. Finally, with this resolution, the California taxpayers have been saved tens of millions of dollars. For the reasons stated, the court approves of this plea. However, the court is not saying that Mr. DeAngelo does not deserve to have the death penalty imposed. It merely means the court feels it would never come to pass. In truth, all the parties should be commended in reaching this resolution, for the result of this trial and a plea of guilty is the same. Mr. DeAngelo will spend the rest of his natural life and ultimately meet his death confined behind the walls of a state penitentiary. I generally don't make comments at sentencing, but I am going to make an exception. Having approved of this plea, I will now move on to the imposition of sentence. Mr. DeAngelo, I've listened for the last 3 days from the people you've terrorized and their friends and their family. Their impact statement will always be with me. I was moved by their courage, their grace, their strength, all qualities you clearly lack. I know whatever words I say today will pale in comparison to the words the survivors have spoken. They need to be said. The fundamental principle of law that justice delayed is justice denied is no truer than in this case. But for the dogged persistence and perseverance of law enforcement, their survivors, their families, and citizen detectives, this case may have remained unsolved. There are many heroes like Carol Daly, Paul Holes, Michelle McNamara, and many heroes that I don't even know that brought this day here. And I have little doubt, but for the tenacity and unwavering quest for justice exhibited by Sacramento District Attorney's Office, Emery Schubert, you may have escaped earthly justice altogether. If I listened to the survivors and I've watched you, I could not help but wondering, what are you thinking? Are you capable of comprehending the pain and anguish you have caused? To quote the great American novelist and California native John Steinbeck, to a man born without a conscience, a soul-stricken man must seem ridiculous. To a criminal, honesty is foolish. You must not forget that a monster is merely a variation, and that to a monster, the norm is monstrous. Mr. Steinbeck seems to think that monsters are born and not created. I'm not so sure, but one thing I do know, when a person commits monstrous acts, they need to be locked away where they can never harm another innocent person. It is my sincere hope that with the opportunity to be heard these last few days and the sentence to be imposed, the survivors will find some resolution, will find some peace, and hopefully find some justice, however imperfect. Mr. DeAngelo, I sentence you to the following. Count 1, the charge of murder in the first degree of Claude Snelling, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. The court hereby sentences the defendant to imprisonment for life. By operational law, the minimum parole eligibility for this offense is 7 years. Regarding the weapon enhancement, that in the course of that murder, that you personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed for the first-degree murder of Claude Snelling. Count 1 will run concurrent with a sentence to be announced in Count 2 by operation of law. Count 2, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Katie Majori, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and in conjunction with the multiple murder special circumstance Penal Code 190.2 paren A paren 3 and Penal Code Section 190.2 paren C paren 5, this court hereby sentences the defendants to life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of 2 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in Count 2 is to run concurrent with the sentences on all pre-1979 offenses. However, the life without the possibility of parole sentence as to Counts 2 will run consecutive to all post-1979 life without the possibility of parole sentences in Counts 4 through 13 and Count 26. Count 3, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Brian Majori, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and in conjunction with the multiple murder special circumstance code 190.2 paren C paren 3, as well as Penal Code Section 190 paren C paren 5, the court hereby sentences you to life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 122.5. The court imposes a sentence of 2 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in Count 3 to run concurrent with Count 2 by operation of law. Count 4, for the charge of murder in the first degree, Deborah Manning, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, that murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of a rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2 paren C paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2 paren C paren 3 paren 5. The court hereby sentenced the defendant to an additional life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 122.5. The court imposes an additional sentence of 2 years to run consecutive. The sentence to Count 4 to be served consecutive to Count 2 and consecutive to sentence to be imposed in Counts 5 through 13 and Count 26. Count 5, for the murder of the first degree of Robert Offerman, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, that is the murder having also been committed while engaged in the commission of burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2 paren C paren 3 paren 5. The court hereby sentenced the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapon enhancement, that in the course of that murder, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5. The court imposes a sentence of an additional 2 years to run consecutive. The sentence in Count 5 to be served consecutive to Count 2 and Count 4, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in Counts 6 through 13 and Count 26. Count 6. for the murder in the first degree of Sherry Domingo, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 6 to be served consecutive to counts 2, 4, and 5, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 17 through 13 and count 26. Count 7, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Greg Sanchez, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of a burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that murder, defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes an additional sentence of 2 years to run consecutive. The sentence in count 7 to be served consecutive to counts 2 in counts 4 through 6, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 8 through 13 and count 26. Count 8. For the charge of murder in the first degree of Charlene Smith, violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That sentence in count 8 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 7, as well as consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 9 through 13 and count 26. Count 9. For the first-degree murder of Lyman Smith, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of a burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 9 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 8, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 10 through 13 and count 26. Count 10. For the charge of murder in the first degree of Patrice Harrington, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaging in the commission of rape, violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, and paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That sentence in count 10 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and 4 through 9, and consecutive to sentence to be imposed in counts 11 through 13 and count 26. Count 11, the charge of murder in the first degree of Keith Harrington, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder was committed while engaged in the commission of a burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 11 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 10, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 12, 13, and 26. Count 12, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Manuel Whitney, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. That murder having been committed while engaged in the commission of rape, violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7, and robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 1. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The sentence in count 12 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 11, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 13 and 26. Count 13, for the charge of murder in the first degree, Janelle Cruz, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and that murder was committed while engaged in the commission of a rape, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 3, and burglary, a violation of Penal Code Section 190.2, paren A, paren 17, paren 7. The court hereby sentences the defendant to an additional sentence of life without the possibility of parole. That sentence in count 13 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and 4 through 12, and consecutive to the sentence to be imposed in counts 26. Count 14, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping that the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, then more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 14 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 15 through 25 by operation of law. Count 15, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding for the weapons enhancement, that the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court hereby imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 15 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and count 14, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 16 through 25 by operation of law. Count 16, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 16 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 and 15, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 17 through 25 by operation of law. Count 17, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 17 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 through 16, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 18 through 25 by operation of law. Count 18, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 18 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 17, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 19 through 25 by operation of law. Count 19, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the Point 5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 19 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 18, and a sentence to be imposed in counts 20 through 25 by operation of law. Excuse me. Count 20, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentenced the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 20 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 19, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 21 through 25 by operation of law. Count 21, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 21 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 through 20, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 22 through 25 by operation of law. Count 22, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentenced the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposed a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 22 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 20, and a sentence to be imposed in counts 23 through 25 by operation of law. Count 23, for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 23 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 22, and the sentence to be imposed in counts 24 and 25 by operation of law. Count 24, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209, the court hereby sentenced the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 24 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and 14 through 23, with a sentence to be imposed in count 25 by operation of law. Count 25, the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentences the defendant to life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a knife, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years, no more than 10 years to run concurrent with the sentence just imposed by operation of law. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed by operation of law. The sentence in count 25 to be served concurrent with counts 1 through 3 and counts 14 through 24 by operation of law. Count 26 for the charge of kidnapping with intent to commit robbery, a violation of Penal Code Section 209. The court hereby sentenced the defendant to an additional sentence of life with a minimum of 7 years. Regarding the weapons enhancement, that in the course of that kidnapping, the defendant personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 12022.5. The court imposes a sentence of 2 years to run consecutive with the sentence just imposed. The sentence in count 26 to be served consecutive to counts 2 and counts 4 through 13. The aggregate sentence for Joseph James DeAngelo is the following. For counts 2 and 14 through 13, he's committed to the state prison for the indeterminate term of 11 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The sentence to run consecutive to the indeterminate life term for count 26. The weapons enhancements in counts 4, 5, 7, and 26 consist of an aggregate determinate term of 8 years to run consecutive. Another way to state the sentence is as follows. Mr. DeAngelo is sentenced to a total of 11 life without the possibility of parole sentences, plus an additional life sentence, plus an additional 8 years. This is the absolute maximum sentence the court is able to impose under the law. And while the court has no power to make a determination of where the defendant is imprisoned, the survivors have spoken clearly. The defendant deserves no mercy. Credits are restricted to 850 actual days. The California restitution statute, Penal Code Section 1202.4, did not take an effect until January 1st, 1985. Prior to that, there was no provision for restitution. The court will order restitution for count 13, the murder of Janelle Cruz. If the defendant is entitled to a hearing on that restitution, the Department of Corrections is authorized to collect restitution according to the acceptable statutes and regulations. The order for restitution is enforceable as a civil judgment. Prior to 1984, Penal Code Section 672 provided a fine to up to $5,000 for a conviction of a felony. Commencing January 1st, 1984, the fine was increased to $10,000. Consequently, counts 1 through 12 and counts 14 through 26 are subject to a maximum of $5,000 fine, and count 13 is subject to a maximum of $10,000 fine, and I order these fees and fines to be imposed at the maximum. Pursuant to Penal Code Section 290 or 290, you must register as a sex offender with the chief of the police in the city or the sheriff or the county in which you reside for the remainder of your life. You must submit to an AIDS test. Pursuant to Penal Code Section 1202.1, you are advised that you may never own or possess a firearm or ammunition for the rest of your life. You are ordered to satisfy the requirements of Penal Code Section 296 and 296.1 by providing DNA samples as well as thumb and palm prints. Having waived your appeal rights, the advisement of appellate rights are not applicable. The court reporter will prepare a transcript of these sentencing proceedings to be filed for any future dates. Counsel, is there anything else before we adjourn?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. DeAngelo, you're now remanded to the custody of the Sheriff of Sacramento to be delivered to the custody of Director of Corrections and Rehabilitation to serve the remainder of your life in state prison. We are adjourned.
Court is in recess for the day. I ask that the audience on this side please be the first to exit. The media that's along the back wall, I ask that you just remain in place. There's a press conference forthcoming, but don't.
Okay,
tear
and with
down
that,
and
Golden
set up
State killer Joseph DeAngelo has been sentenced to life in prison. Joining me now is former prosecutor and defense attorney Mike Wise with the Wise Law Group. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the judge threw the book at DeAngelo.
He even gave him the maximum fines that were allowed by law. He's maxed out on multiple life terms. He will never get out of custody.
And let's just talk about all of these life sentences. It sounded to me like at least 26 consecutive life sentences. What else did you hear that you thought was significant in what he received as a sentence today?
The way it breaks down under the law, sentencing law has changed over the years, and because some of these allegations are so old and so dated, some of the sentencing for the older crimes are 7 years to life versus life without parole. Then you have additional determinate time that is based on the weapons enhancements. So the way it will break down on a technical basis is he would serve initially 8 years of determinate time. Then he would begin his additional life sentences at that point. Technically, he would have been eligible for parole after 7 years on the oldest murder case. But once that time expires, then he will begin his serving his life without parole sentences.
Okay,
back to back.
And with all of these charges, about 161 separate crimes, and this could very possibly be just the tip of the iceberg, right? There could be other crimes out there that were not actually charged.
That's true. I'm sure, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure. It's entirely possible that there were other victims given the breadth of his conduct and the age of some of these crimes that we don't know about at this time. At this point, given his multiple life sentences, I don't know if there would be any purpose or any desire by any other district attorneys to pursue a case against him at this point, because he is truly never getting out.
Okay, and joining us right now is Mike Wise, former prosecutor and defense attorney with the Wise Law Group. Mike, we heard from DeAngelo today. Tell me a little bit about what we did here.
I thought that was interesting. It's an apology. It's a brief apology, but it is an apology. And I think based on what we've heard about him and the conduct that he engaged in and the way he is perceived by these victims, he appears to be nothing more than an animal in the way he's been described. But we also know that Mr. DeAngelo started a family at some point and thereafter stopped engaging in this behavior. And I would love to find out, I would love to know if that was the trigger for him that caused him to stop engaging in this behavior, and if he truly is legitimately sorry. Under the law, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for the sentence. And I don't think the victims truly care, but he may actually mean it. I don't know.
Yeah, something psychologists will certainly be pondering over for years to come.
Absolutely.
Now, we did hear from members of his family today who wrote letters and submitted them to court. Tell me about what we heard from them.
It's not uncommon, again, for people who engage in a lifestyle that gets them into court to have mothers, daughters, children, family members that love them and see an entirely different side of them. Again, this is an interesting case because the family love and the bonds that he created occurred years after the criminal conduct. And so both lives are potentially true in the sense that he engaged in the behavior and then stopped and created these loving bonds with these other people who had no idea about the conduct that he engaged in years before.
Yeah, that's right. We even heard that he might have taken in a niece for a number of years. We heard from another family member that he was, in fact, her favorite person. It just really seems to be a stark contrast to everything else that we've heard for the past.
It is really an interesting contrast in personalities and priorities in life. And I think, again, like you said, it's going to be an interesting study for somebody at some point to hopefully interview him and learn about the conduct and the state of mind that he was in at the time versus where he is today.
I also wanted to highlight what the judge said toward the end of the sentencing there. He said that he normally doesn't make a comment, but he would today. What do you think about that?
Yes. It doesn't surprise me, given the gravity of the case and the size of the case, all the efforts that have been expended across counties, the excellent representation by the local counsel here on behalf of Mr. DeAngelo, that he would recognize the gravity of this case, also the sincerity and the intensity of the statements that were being made by victims in court. It doesn't surprise me that he would make comments about that. However, true to fashion, Mike Bowman is a very professional judge. He's a humble judge, and he limited those comments kept them succinct, and got the job done.
Okay, now I just want to read DeAngelo's actual statement to court. It was only a couple sentences long. He said, "I've listened to each of your statements, every one of them. I'm very sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you." And that was it. Do you think that was sincere?
I would have to know him to know. He appeared to mean it when he said it, but he's engaged in so many charades and hyperbole over the years and deception over the years. Even his conduct in court, appearing feeble when he was admitting to his crimes, appeared to be false or fraudulent. So it's really difficult to know. I don't know him personally, so I can't say for sure. But it was better than him getting up and taunting or mocking or making any disparaging comments. I will say that.
Okay, Mike Wise, defense attorney and former prosecutor with the Wise Law Group. Let's go out now to Madison Wade, who is at the Sac State Ballroom, which is where all the events took place today. Madison, what have you been seeing?
Absolutely, Mike. Yeah, so just now, after DeAngelo was sentenced and rolled out in a wheelchair, many of the survivors and the families of the victims stood and also waved him goodbye. Many of them said goodbye in kind of a joking manner, if you will. And so now he is going to be sentenced, he already was sentenced to 11 life in sentences without the possibility of parole, among other sentencing in life prison terms. So again, that is the overall feeling in this ballroom today, as people were really not expecting for him to stand up. I think we want to make that point too. He's been this entire time in a wheelchair. He's been unable to speak at times, speak loudly and clearly. Today, he stood up and he said he was truly sorry after listening to all the statements of the victims and also the survivors. So that is something to make a point of. I'm going to hopefully talk to some of these survivors we've done stories with to ask them what this apology means for them. But we did talk to Jane Carson Sandler earlier this week, and she told us that if he does ever stand up and say he was going to be sorry for what he did, that she would faint. She was really not expecting him to do this. So that is just from one of the survivors we have talked to several times. Now again, Mike, this is a historic day for so many people who have been waiting for this. We do have news conferences to get to with all the DAs and also survivors and victim families. So there's a lot of people to talk to today to get the reaction of what DeAngelo apologized for. Also, just to see if it's a sincere apology, if it does resonate with any of these people. But I will say, a lot of the people who were sitting there watching this happen, they did not act as if it was something that was sincere. Some people scoffed, some people laughed about it. Of course, it was a shocking moment for so many people in this ballroom, as we did not expect him to apologize and stand up and say something very clearly, as he has been putting on an act, as we know from investigators who have told us that for a while now.
Yeah, we've certainly been hearing that from everybody. In Madison, I can actually see people behind you hugging, kind of celebrating a little bit. What would you say the feeling is in that room right now?
Yeah, right now, Mike, a lot of survivors are talking amongst themselves. You know, this is their day. This has been a day they've been waiting for decades for. This is something that they have all gotten so close together. They bonded together for so many years. These survivors didn't know about each other because this case wasn't talked about. None of these survivors were truly friends until about several years ago, when the case started to get closer, and then DeAngelo was arrested 2 years ago. So now, talk about a women of 50 people who are all very close. They have lunches together, they gather together, they are at conferences together. These are all truly really good friends now, and so that's what the room feels like. It's powerful, to say the least, and these women have been through so much, and here they are today to see justice being served. And it's something, for the victims who are no longer here today, the 13 who were killed at the hands of DeAngelo, those families right now say now their healing process can begin. This is not closure for them. Nothing is closure. Closure would be getting back their loved ones, but that won't happen, as they know. So this is really the beginning of the healing process. So it's a lot of emotions, I would say. People were being passed out Kleenex earlier today if people were going to break down and cry. But I would say overall, I would say the room is very powerful. These women have waited so long, and also the families of these victims have waited so long for justice to be served, and that was just served minutes ago.
Yeah, let's hope that 26 life sentences, the judge giving him the maximum charge that he could possibly receive, is a little bit of consolation. Thank you, Madison. All right, let's also check in now with ABC 10's Carlos Herrera, who's live outside the Sac State Ballroom. And Carlos, just tell us what you've been seeing and experiencing all day.
Well, when talking about how emotional it's been, but definitely also shocking, surprising, and unexpected sentencing hearing that ended with people inside that Sac State Ballroom clapping, and we've seen most of that as well outside the ballroom as they kind of leave that ballroom. We've seen these survivors and their families holding hands, most of them hugging, talking with each other, group hugs as well, celebrating this moment. And as we've been mentioning all morning, Madison just mentioned as well, this doesn't bring closure for them because obviously they're still mourning the death of their loved ones and the impacts that have come with those assaulted victims. To my left, we're also seeing that brown van that actually brought DeAngelo into this ballroom through a back door. We're waiting for this van to leave. In just a few minutes, we're expecting that van to drive right in front of us and take DeAngelo back to prison. Now, again, a very emotional morning here with DeAngelo's attorneys reading letters from his family members. We didn't expect that. We also had a district attorneys delivering speeches asking the judge to give DeAngelo the maximum sentence, which he did. And of course, the most unexpected moment was when, as you mentioned, Mike, DeAngelo getting up from that wheelchair, taking off his mask and saying, quote, "I've listened to all of your statements, each and one of them. I'm really sorry for everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor." Very short statement from DeAngelo. The big question is this morning, did he mean it? But again, that's something that the survivors and their family members were calling for. They were demanding more respect from DeAngelo, some sign of remorse. And that's exactly what he did. At least that's what he portrayed as he stood up on that stage this morning. Now, I am seeing some movement near that brown van that's parked. You're welcome.
Kind of like what he's doing right now. Just do something similar.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm good, Ann. Yep. Mm-hmm.
What's that mic in the middle for? I don't know. Is that what they're walking up to them or what? Yeah. I think this person looking that way, they're going to be shot.
Hey, Garza.
Look up at Mike.
Garza, we're going to go live at 11 real quick. I know this starts so...
Okay, give me that.
Yeah.
Box right here. Standing next to the box.
Thank you. Cool. Okay. I'm going to text them.
Okay. You got you. Live fish on the line.
Yes.
I'm good.
Thank you. Sorry. No, all the cameras are pointing in our direction.
It's kind of funny to me, because I'm usually behind the camera, right? I'm usually like behind pitching at these guys. Did you get the shot? So it's kind of funny.
You going to get her on camera right now?
Yeah. I'm going to do a live interview with her.
Oh, live. Okay. You're going to wait for the live, right?
Yeah. Well, we're going to start
There's
the show.
food in my teeth. You wear a mask. But now the mask is off.
Mic check, 1, 2,
There's no food in my
mic
teeth.
check, 1, 2.
No, you're good.
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2, mic check, 1, 2.
Not yet. Nothing.
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2, test, test, 1, 2, 1, 2, test, test, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay, stand by.
Power source.
Test, test, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, test, test. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2, test, test. Test, test, 1, 2, 1, 2, test, test. Mic check, 1, 2.
You can back up.
Well, I'm laughing
Check,
because
check, 1, 2, 1, 2, test, test, 1, 2, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2.
this cord, the power cord I can't find on this thing. Where's this? There it is. Okay, I see. There you go. The thing just went on.
Any press that did not get a press
That's my old job.
can see me up
Where's everything working?
It's distorted.
Test, test, 1, 2.
Sounds like line, doesn't it?
We'll keep it short.
Test, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Anyone look at that one? It's people mic level.
Check,
It
check,
doesn't
1,
sound
2,
good
1,
though,
2.
the mic.
Test,
It sounds like
test,
crap
1, 2,
out
1,
here.
2. Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
It's over mod.
Check, check,
Totally
1, 2,
over.
1, 2. Test, test, 1, 2.
Sounds like line.
2, 2. A, B, C, D, 1, 2.
Wait,
Check,
no,
check, 1, 2. Test, test.
They're sending it to my
Test,
phone.
test, test, test.
Yeah, it sounds like it's
Absolutely,
pushing
yeah.
line
So
out,
we're
not
going to
mic.
talk, this is the middle of a news conference situation that's going to happen in just a little bit, so excuse the technical difficulties happening. But here with me is Jennifer Carroll. She's the daughter of Lyman Smith, murdered in Ventura County, incredibly integral in this case because the DNA of Charlene led to the arrest of DeAngelo. So what did you think of his apology?
I think it was exactly the only thing he could say. I think anything else he might have said would have gone sideways. I speculated last night that it potentially might have brought up Jerry. I don't want to hear that. I think he said the only thing he could have said with the fewest words possible, and that, frankly, for me, does not cause any injury. It was fine. It was just fine.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, I know you were talking about the energy in this room, the power in this room, of all the women, yourself not being a survivor, but you are also a victim as a family member of someone who was killed at the hands of DeAngelo. What does this day mean for you?
I have to say, this is the first time since the pandemic hit where I have been in a room with this much feeling, positivity, energy, hope being done. It's not closure, it's just being done. Like tomorrow we can sleep in, can you imagine? And so it's a really good feeling, and everyone here there's a little jubilance, which is cool. I think also I was left today after hearing the statements from DeAngelo's family with a bit of cognitive dissonance on my part, meaning that I think it's really easy to hate. Hate is an easy emotion, right? It's just, you feel it and it comes. But now I understand and I have a different level of compassion for his family members. I knew they had had a hard time, but to know that they loved him and that he was capable of having people love him tells me a lot about how empty he is, because clearly he couldn't have felt it. He could not have been fueled and nourished by that love, because if he had been, at some point he would be hear remorse and have tremendous regrets, even just for those people that spoke of their love for him, and yet he can't do that. So just imagine, like, that's almost more sad than anything, is that he's just incapable. He's just, it's not, there's no humanness there. So that actually kind of tore me up. I felt really bad for those family members, and I understand how Carrie Rawson has struggled. She's the daughter of BTK, and she constantly deals with that dissonance between what she knew and what is also true. So it's been a powerful morning. I didn't expect it, and yet I was told it would be a powerful day, and it has been.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, could you speak to also the friendships you've gained through this, the incredible amount of survivors and women? You all gather, you have lunches together, you talk amongst yourselves, and you all are friends.
Yeah, we have, I really recommend this to anyone who's a sexual assault victim. Please don't do this alone. I know it feels safer, and it feels like it's your shame and that you're afraid, but what I have learned in watching these women and being one of them, my God, they're my friends, is that just listening to one another and taking that time, sexual assault victims, they want to talk. They want to tell their story, but I think the rest of us are afraid. Don't be afraid. Just listen. Just listen and support them. They'll tell you what they need, because a lot of times they don't know right away, so they're going slowly too. But allies are everything. Don't do this alone. I know stranger rape is easier, if that's such a thing. Can you believe it? People have the less shame because it was a stranger rape. People that know you and have hurt you, that are people you know, that's much more shame. But I want you to move out of that if you can, at the pace that you need to go. But it's time, and I really recommend joining Chris Pedretti's group on Facebook, because we're all there and you can start to get the support you need. If it's just your baby step, please come.
Absolutely. You women are incredible, inspiring, so strong. Thank you for your time, Jennifer. I know this day means the world to you, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Again, that is Jennifer Carroll. She's the daughter of Lyman Smith, one of the 13 murdered victims, alongside his wife, Charlene, at the time. We are going to go to a press conference here now, so we're going to need to wrap things up and send it back to you, Brittany and Kirsten, from here at Sac State after the sentencing of the East Area rapist and Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo. Thanks for that. Are they letting us move the cameras or no? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Take his credit.
You want it further out? You good?
I did anything right now. Perfect, got it, thanks.
I got three, high three.
I got 31.
Oh, no, lower.
They just changed it, that's why.
Oh, because it got a little warmer.
It did get a little warmer.
3450 is actually holding up.
Actually, this one is like 31. Does these lights are weird colors?
They're very yellow.
They're green. Yeah, they're kind of green.
Yeah, I got 31. Does look a little better.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot better. It's really good. Yeah. You want to wait?
Okay, we're ready to start.
Did they fix that?
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're going to start with DA Amory Schubert.
Thank you. So after the last 2 years of court proceedings, many people have asked and wondered, really, who is Joseph DeAngelo? Is he a feeble, old 74-year-old man? Is he psychologically impaired? Is he physically impaired? Is he even competent to stand trial or to enter those guilty pleas we saw on June 29th when he rolled in a wheelchair and feigned feebleness? The answer to those questions that so many people have wondered for the last 2 years lies within the definition of a sociopath. A sociopath, in our world, we understand, is a person who has no respect for the rights of other human beings, no respect for the law, no compassion, no empathy, no remorse. He is a person who lacks a conscience or a soul. And under the definition of a sociopath, he is a person who lies, deceives, and manipulates others for no other reason than personal gain. Over the last 2 years, since the first day he was wheeled into a courtroom for his arraignment in a wheelchair in April of 2018 to the day of his plea on June 29th, to this entire week, sitting stone-faced in front of the world, each of us has witnessed a sociopath in action. The truth of who Joseph DeAngelo is lies not just in what happened in the courthouse, but what has happened in his jail cell. One only needs to look back a few months from today to see the real Joseph DeAngelo. We, as part of this team, felt that it was critically important to show the victims, the public, and perhaps the world, this sociopath in action. And I again would remind you of how things unfolded on June 29th when he pled. This is only a snippet of a CD anybody wishes to have at the end of these proceedings of his actions within his jail cell. This is June 1st, just a couple weeks before he pled. He's not a feeble old man, as he portrayed himself to be on June 29th. The next video I'm going to show you is from June 17th, just 12 days before. And before I play this, I ask you to watch it closely. Watch it for what he does, watch his flexibility, watch his dexterity, watch his mental drive. Think back on the crimes that he committed. Think back about what he did to escape. Think back what he did to shadow the light. Mr. Totten reminded us a few minutes ago of how Mr. DeAngelo attempted to hide the light so he could remain in darkness during the commission of his crimes. And when we watched this, we were struck by what happened 45 years later. And we hearkened back to those crimes of what he did to hide the light and to remain in the darkness. These are photographs from some of the crime scenes where he put blankets over televisions or lights. And so when you look back in time 4 decades, and you now stand in the presence of 2020, you can see that Joseph DeAngelo is no different today than he was 45 years ago. And lastly, just a couple weeks ago, as you see on the top there, again, he's moved to a new cell, I believe, and he's got light once again covered with papers. And this last one is to simply demonstrate to you his mental acuity, his dexterity, his ability to deceive or attempt to deceive the entire world into believing he is a feeble old man. These are just snippets into the window of the mind of a sociopath. He is, quite simply, the definition of one. He has and always will be a sociopath in action. Today, the world knows that. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Spitzer, for his additional comments.
You know, we've talked so much about this case over the course of many months, and today really is and was the sentencing. And I made a comment earlier about just how proud I am to have worked with these prosecutors and their teams. To all the victims, I just want to say something. I know you know this, but I don't think the public understands sometimes. Just the fact that there was dogged perseverance and people never gave up to solve this case. The law enforcement community, I personally, and I know my colleagues, because we are part of law enforcement, that I want to congratulate them publicly. And I want to do it because I've talked to so many of the victims, and certainly the victims from Orange County, and I know just how thankful they are. And these are dedicated people. Many were retired, came back into public service to help solve this case. I hadn't seen these videos of the convict, to quote Drew Witten, one of my victims from Orange County, who was a police officer in Garden Grove for 20 years. I hadn't seen these videos until today. But in our own presence, just a few minutes ago, quite frankly, Mr. DeAngelo tried to pull a fast one on all of us in our own presence, and we were witnesses to it. I'm not sure you saw how quickly he stood up out of his chair. I'm not sure you saw how strong his voice was. That voice was completely inconsistent with the body that he was trying to fake us all out with. My voice isn't even that strong, and I'm 20 years younger than he is. There's something about the proceeding that really upset me when he stood up and gave his statement. They tried to shift the sympathy table here today. They tried to get all these people covering this story to say something nice or empathetic about this monster. I was fixated the entire time on his eyes. The eyes are the windows to people's soul. He never looked up once, either during any of our statements or any of his own loved ones' statements. Everything this week was testimony of victims who despise him and his conduct. Today, we heard from people who love him. And this is what he didn't do, which upsets me greatly in his statement. He said, "I've listened to all of your statements. I'm very, truly sorry to everyone I have hurt." Everyone. Who did he leave out? The people who say they love him. He didn't just destroy your lives. Could you imagine being the daughter of Joseph DeAngelo? Going through life asking yourself, did he pass on through my genetic framework something that makes me somehow the same? Or his former wife, the betrayal to their marriage and that relationship. He not only hurt all of you, he left a wake of devastation with his family members who have part of him inside of them. And that has got to be a terrible, terrible, terrible nightmare. So he tried to fake us out. And by leaving out his relatives, he proved to me that it was a fake. That statement apologizing was a fake, because if he was truly remorseful about apologizing to everyone, to quote him, who he hurt, he would have included a hell of a lot more people. So I just want to say this. I am begging you not to report it that way. I think it was my colleague from Tulare County who said that this is going to go into the history books. The history cannot be remembered that he stood up here and apologized to the victims. It can't be that his niece said he was the most beloved person in her life. It can't be a friend who said he was one of the he was the sixth boy in the family. That was an effort to humanize him. You cannot humanize him. I feel so sorry for the family members and the friends who had any connection whatsoever. I don't besmirch them or in any way denigrate what they tried to offer here today. But I will not allow, as an elected prosecutor representing at least the 3.3 million people in Orange County, to have him remembered that way during his sentencing. It was a sham. He was not remorseful. He failed to apologize to important people. He left devastation in his tracks. I can never forgive him. Some of you are more mature and more spiritual than me. You have gone to a higher place than I can. I can't forgive him. I never will. Which is why I told him I wanted to watch him die. I wanted to watch him put to death. And I've already explained that, and there's no reason to dwell on it any longer. Today, when you leave this building, many of us will never see each other again. I want you to know that this has been one of the proudest moments in my career as a prosecutor. Whether as the elected or a line prosecutor, I started my career as a prosecutor, and I will end my career as a prosecutor. And I can tell you, I've never been more proud to be part of this family. You are part of our family. We are always part of your family. Nothing about these proceedings will change that in any way whatsoever. Because I told you I was selfish when I told you I wanted to see him put to death, I want to celebrate a moment right now. We did a moment of silence. I would ask you, as the victims' families and survivors, please join me in thanking my colleagues, and all the law enforcement officials who are here today for everything they did to bring that, I'd love to, but I can't, that fill in the blank finally to justice. God bless my colleagues.
I'll invite any of my other colleagues up that wish to give a statement. D.A. Dudley.
I just want to remind everyone that today, good triumphed over evil. Victims who either were recipient witnesses or had to live their life without their loved ones, you're such good people, and you just keep on doing good deeds, and it makes all the difference in the world. And the law enforcement officers, Fred, you've been doing this for 30, 35 years. You followed this case. You were part of this case. And every other law enforcement officer who didn't sleep at night trying to find the answers, your good people and your good dudes happen every day. And above all, I want to thank Anne Marie Schubert. She was our hero in all of this. She was the one who stood up and said, let's find him. And she inspired all of the other district attorneys on this stage to work harder in this case. And we did. And Anne Marie Schubert, if it wasn't for you, none of us would be here today. Thank you. Thank your team.
I'm just going to say it, Team Justice. Anybody else? D.A. Becton, D.A. Ward, D.A. Salazar from San Joaquin?
Good afternoon. On behalf of San Joaquin County, we would like to thank District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert, her team, her victim advocates, her investigators, my brothers and sisters from neighboring counties for their teams and their hard work and dedication to making this a day of justice, a day of truth. But most of all, I would like to thank you, each and every one of you, the victims, the survivors, families. Today is not about him. Today is about you. We're in a country that needs heroes. It needs people to admire and respect, to look up to and to believe in, to know that there is hope and there is goodness. And you, as the victims, the survivors, and the family members, give everybody in the great state of California and the United States of America somebody to look up to, somebody to admire, somebody to believe in, somebody to thrive to be. 1 in 3 women will likely be sexually harassed or raped in their life. 5 out of every 1,000 cases will be reported. But today, you're going to change that. It is one of the most unreported and most traumatizing crimes in our nation. But today, you give the power to the 995 other women out there who couldn't raise their voice because of the fear of what would happen, the fear of reliving it. You put that power in their voice, in their hands, and in their soul, and in their body to rise up so that someday my colleagues and I sit here and we say 1,000 for 1,000 spoke up and raised their voice and justice was sought for. So today, as my colleague from down south said, don't report about him. Report about these women and these men who've endured unimaginable pain and suffering, no doubt about it, like the likes we have never seen before. If you heard anything these last days, you know what true evil and terror looks like. But better and more important is you know what a hero looks like. You know what a courage looks like. You know what faith and strength in a better world looks like. I had the privilege of working with 4 victims, John and Jane Doe and Bob and Gay, for the last couple of years. Tough as nails, fought as hard as they could for this justice, and raised their voice at every step of the way to make sure that they were heard, they were seen, and that justice prevailed. And each and every one of you did that. Each and every one of you are what this story is about, because you're amazing. You're incredible, and you're a testimony to what makes America great, and that is its strength and its courage to look evil in the face and to say, we won. Justice prevailed. So on behalf of San Joaquin County, all of the members of my community, we thank the team of prosecutors here. You guys were amazing. Anne Marie Schubert deserves an award for her leadership and what she has done to bring this case. But each and every one of you deserves a Medal of Honor for the courage and the strength that you have shown and for the power you have given to everybody in our country. So thank you.
Nancy O'Malley, Alameda County.
Thank you. I'm going to just echo everything that has been said already. I will tell you that for me today is I stand with all of the victims and with everyone else. I was there when this guy was raping women. I was in college as a victim advocate, and I went to the hospital with the victims. I talked to victims on the phone who were scared to death that they thought he was in their house. We lived in terror when he was on his reign of terror. And I'm so grateful that Anne Marie Schubert and all of these incredible prosecutors and district attorneys banded together to make sure that we could solve this crime. I will tell you that this state has passed a law that requires law enforcement to submit every sexual assault forensic exam to a crime lab for testing. Because if we do not submit those exams for testing, that DNA will sit in a police evidence room or in a lab untested. And I'm grateful that we have been so strong in our advocacy to make sure that all kits are tested. And I just want to say that I'm so appreciative of DA Salazar for talking so profoundly about the challenges that women have and men have of stepping forward to talk about their victimization. And this case and the courage of all of the victims and the victim survivors that came up and bravely gave your statement, and bravely gave your statement when it happened with law enforcement, allows us to put this man away forever. So thank you for reporting this story so thoroughly. It's sensational, but it's also incredibly profound in what it says about our community, our society, and how we need to take care of each other. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll take some questions. Anybody else? Am I missing?
Yeah,
take
we're
some
going
questions now. Shelley's going to be in charge of all this now.
So anyone who wants to ask a question, please come to this microphone here. Please identify your media organization and your name.
Why he was committing these murders, these rapes in these different communities where he didn't live as well, such as Contra Costa County and Alameda County. Did he travel there? Did he visit people? We saw the statement from the wife saying that he said he'd go pheasant hunting. He says he's going to work, visit his parents from far away. Do we have any more clarity on why he picked those different communities?
I think probably from everyone that's worked on this, whether it's Larry Crompton or Paul Holes or Ken and Clark or hundreds of detectives, you can put in all the DAs that have been dedicated. The answer to those questions, I'm not sure we'll ever know, honestly. I mean, we've all, I don't want to use the word speculated, but conjectured, have theories. It's the million-dollar question I'm not sure we'll ever know. So unless somebody else has some theory. Greg?
The other aspect of it is this is a common question in major cases of this nature, and what you witnessed today was just the briefest of statements, And I think from a law enforcement perspective, I think we can all agree that we have no confidence that anything this predator would say about why he engaged in this type of conduct would be honest. I think, many other cases we've seen predators try to minimize their conduct or blame it on some circumstance of their childhood or some mental health condition. We have no reason to believe, notwithstanding some of the letters that were read to you, we have absolutely no reason to believe that this man suffered terrible trauma as a child. He lived a normal life. We have no reason to believe that he will ever tell us the truth. And if he does make a statement, we would tend to doubt the veracity of that statement.
I just want to before I go to the next question, I just wanted to make it somewhat of an additional comment, and it really is in line with Mr. Spitzer of, his statement today. And one of the victims, I don't remember who it was, but said, his last victims were his family, and I believe that to be true. And we heard some statements today, but I would remind folks that while some folks said he was a normal teenage boy in their neighborhood or group, he was a teenager who was blowing up animals, breaking into homes, and learning how to become a serial rapist and a serial killer. So please don't ever forget who the real man is.
I'm Rowena Shaddix from Fox 40. Is the work on this case completed? Because I've spoken to one of the special agents that investigated this in Sacramento, and he said there were still rapes, murders that he believed was linked to Joseph DeAngelo, but hasn't been proven yet.
I mean, I think we'd all probably collectively say, and many of the folks like Erica Hutchcraft from Orange County, Paul, Ken Clark, Larry Poole, who have dedicated their lives, I mean, we know what we know. Rowena, that's where'd you go. We know what we know. We know, because of the power of the data bank that the Harringtons brought to us, we know what's been put into it, and we know what's been linked. Does that mean that there are not other crimes out there? Absolutely not. I don't believe we will ever know the magnitude of what Mr. DeAngelo did.
Anne Marie, Paige St. John with the Los Angeles Times. Had this case gone to trial, if you had not had the DNA match, would you have had enough evidence to get a guilty conviction?
Well, I mean, that's like asking us to take away evidence that we didn't have, Paige. I mean, we had overwhelming evidence of the signature of the crimes, the manner of which they were committed. Then you find out everything fell in line. He was a police officer. He was in the military. He lived in the areas. But let's be honest, it was the DNA that became the most critical piece of evidence that, but for that, we wouldn't be here today.
The family tree matching has not yet withstood, as I understand it, direct challenge in criminal court. The majority of cold cases that have been solved have either ended in pleas, like this one did, or with defendants who have long been dead. So if a court had ruled that evidence inadmissible, aside from the circumstantial evidence of the geography and timing of Joseph DeAngelo's life, did your investigators post-arrest find significant evidence that incriminated him?
Well, he sat in an interview room and he muttered to himself about his mother making him do it, or Jerry, or anybody else. But just to be clear, and to flip this really in a positive light, is that since, as Mr. Totten said, or others have said, since this arrest, close to 100 cases have been solved. And yes, cases have gone to trial in this country based upon investigative genetic genealogy, and guilty verdicts have come very swiftly. And yes, we've had pleas, and the last time I checked, somebody doesn't plead to the rape murder of an 8-year-old little girl in Fort Wayne, Indiana, if they actually didn't do it. So I understand it, But like the DNA data bank, when we get a cold hit off the data bank, that's an investigative lead that law enforcement then takes, and then you follow the dude around, collect his DNA, and you have a direct match of the East Area Rapist, Golden State Killer to Joseph DeAngelo. So, yes.
So, Todd Spitz, Orange County. Bruce and Ron Harrington testified yesterday in front of the court on their victim impact statement. And one of the things they shared is since the advent of investigative genetic genealogy, we've solved 93 cases throughout the country. That probably would have gone cold forever. When they, prior to introducing Proposition 69 in 2004, there were 1,200 cases solved because of DNA, and now there's 81,000. So I appreciate the question from the Los Angeles Times. I know it's a national periodical, but of course it covers Orange County because I'm just adjacent to Los Angeles. And I want to say this unequivocally. And they said it yesterday, I'm just repeating the words of the Harringtons. That is something that DNA is something I'm going to fight for till I go to my grave to make sure we continue to collect DNA from every felon arrested in the state of California. It has brought more closure to more victims than the advent of anything since the fingerprint. So let's get clear about that. Investigative genetic genealogy has been an eye-opener, and it brought closure, as much as you can give that term, to this case. It was the linchpin that solved this case. I will never make excuses, but some of us are supporting a bill in the California legislature for opt-out on voluntary genetic databases, and the leadership of Anne-Marie Schubert and Greg Totten to come up with guidelines which govern the law enforcement use of how we use DNA. You should check out that periodical and that excellent work, both practical and academic. As prosecutors, we are abundantly protective of people's civil rights and the right to anonymity with respect to the use of DNA. We also know in the balance as government officials, sworn elected officials, that it has also been the biggest eye-opener to the solution of cases to give some peace and some opportunity to people sitting in here today who would have no closure, not even anything close to it, if we didn't have the advent of those two tremendous advances in law enforcement.
We have our two last questions, and then we'll take some call-in questions, online questions.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bernstein from Reuters. I was just wondering, how certain are we that he stopped committing these crimes in the late 80s? And if he did stop them, can you offer any insight as to how someone like that might have been able to stop them? And did it bleed out, did it push out in other ways in his life? You know, since then, were there other signs? I'm just curious what your insight is.
I think I tried to answer that earlier. I don't think we'll ever know. I mean, honestly, on the day of his arrest, I got a text message from a colleague of a Wikipedia article about when did forensic DNA come into existence, and it coincidentally was 1986. And so, the question needs to be posed to Mr. DeAngelo. Whether he ever tells you the truth or not is, sorry about that.
Madison Wade with ABC 10. The items that were taken from his home, could you speak to what those items were, and if any of those were ever returned to some of the victims or survivors, if they belonged to them?
I don't think I can speak to those. I don't think so. I don't know about Amy or Tin or any of the prosecutors, but I don't think it's, at this point, I don't believe the arrest warrant or the search warrants have been unsealed from the court, so I don't think it would be appropriate to comment at this point. Maybe someday, though.
Thank you. We'll now take a few online questions.
This question is from Margaret Carrero with KNX 1070 in Los Angeles. This is to any of the district attorneys. What are your thoughts on DeAngelo saying that he was sorry?
Say that one more time, sorry.
What are your thoughts on DeAngelo saying that he was sorry?
I think Mr. Spitzer made it clear.
I'm not going to repeat what I said, but I'll try to say it more succinctly for radio. It was all BS. The next sentence is, you don't stand up here with any sincerity to the victims and say you're covering everyone and fail to talk about your own family members who you betrayed.
The next question is from Tony Cabrera at ABC7 in Los Angeles. Where does DeAngelo go from here? When will his prison location be determined, and when exactly will he be transferred there?
Typically, were it not for COVID-19, an inmate like the defendant would be transported to Tracy prison, where he would go through a screening process and eventually placed for a longer term stay. Inmates that are sentenced to life without possibility of parole are characterized as level 4, and there are only a small number of institutions in the state of California that are considered among the most secure and hardened institutions where somebody like this would go. We don't know where he will end up. We also know that at the current time, because of COVID-19, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is not accepting inmates, sentenced inmates. Most jails, I know my jail in Ventura County, I think has close to 80 inmates that have been sentenced to prison that have not yet been transported, and this is becoming an increasing problem around the state for the administration of local custody facilities. And unfortunately, Mr. DeAngelo is a beneficiary of this circumstance, but ultimately, we intend to make sure that he winds up in an appropriate institution for the magnitude of the crimes he committed and the character and the evil nature of this man.
Okay, so that concludes the press conference. There will be interviews with some of the elected DAs, I think some of the victims. We're going to take about a 15, 20-minute break. And then there's our CDs up here with the full video up on this table. Thank you. Yes, they're all the same.
They're all running. Nice job.
If we don't have, they're all the same. If we don't have enough copies, you can contact the Sacramento County DA's office and we will provide an online copy. No, one per media, they're all the same. One per media organization, please.
Garza, we can interview Paul Holes right now if you want to.
Yeah.
He's available.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure. We're not live on TV. We're only live online.
No,
right?
yeah, we're done. We're done.
And I can only say this, and I say this on many, many occasions. There's not one phone call that I have made to the president where he hasn't quickly responded. And almost in every instance, he's responded favorably in terms of addressing the needs, the emergency needs of the state through COVID, and over the course of the last at least year and a half that I've been governor as it relates to these wildfires. He may make statements publicly, but the working relationship privately has been a very effective one. The reason I push